Now that we have gone through each of the pre-Capellan states, the ones that have been written in at least, we can finally start going through the youngest and smallest great house. We'll start with its early years and go through each era of its existence up until the current times. So without further ado, welcome to this side of the internet, and this is the history of the Capellan Confederation. After the failed and disastrous invasion of the Federated Sons and the subsequent invasion by the Federated Sons, the Capellan commonality faced the looming threat of a Davion takeover of the now crumbled state. In a meeting of all heads of states of the Capellan region, Duke Franco Lao, the Lao Republic, used his strong position of an unscathed Capellan state to blackmail everyone into voting to dissolve the commonality and form a confederation with him leading as Chancellor. There was significant backlash to this proposal, particularly from Warren Aris, who vehemently opposed the move. Aris argued that dissolving the Capellan commonality into a single unified state will mark the end of democracy and the beginning of an authoritarian regime. With tensions rising and arguments from both sides escalating to a point of no return, Caroline Lau, wife of Duke Franco Lau, calmly stood up and approached her husband. In a stunning move, she reached for Franco's sword, pulling it from his belt and placing the tip against his chest. The room fell into a hushed silence, all eyes locked on her. With a voice steady but filled with conviction, she declared,
"We have all heard enough this night. The time is come for us to act, and act quickly. To those of you who fear the threat of dictatorship, to you I swear, I will run my husband through should he ever dare to threaten your freedoms. If need be, I shall demonstrate the truth of my words here and now."
Whether she meant this or it was just a ploy to help her husband, it matters not, as it did exactly what it was supposed to do. The delegates exchanged uncertain glances, the weight of Caroline's words settling over them like a heavy fog. Slowly, the gravity of the situation dawned on each one of them. Hesitant at first, one by one, they raised their hands in agreement, casting their votes for the formation of a unified state. Each decision seemed to carry the somber realization of the era that was about to begin. All except one. Warren Aris stood firm. He alone refused to cast his vote in favor, a final stand against what he saw as the death of democracy. With his lone no echoing in the chamber, a stark reminder of the price being paid for unity. But in the end, it was drowned out by the overwhelming yes of the others. Following this, each nation and independent world was given 400 days to either ratify or reject the Articles of the Confederation. Franco Lao was granted emergency powers by the Assembly. Wasting no time, he declared himself the Prime Minister of the Capellan Commonality. His first act was the dissolution of the Commonality itself, replacing it with the newly formed Capellan Confederation. This new state would unite the key Capellan states including Tikhonov, Sarna, Xi'an, and St. Ives under a single banner. Next, Franco proclaimed himself Chancellor of the Confederation. The legal formalities followed swiftly, with the Assembly delivering an overwhelming 14-1 vote in favor of this new structure. Franco Lau's first act as Chancellor was to offer the position of Deputy Chancellor to Warren Aris. True to his principles, though, Aris refused, standing firm in his commitment to democracy. Without hesitation, Lau ordered his immediate arrest, branding him an enemy of the state. Not a single delegate rose to defend Aris as he was led away, disappearing into the shadows of history, never to be seen again. His fate, much like democracy in the Confederation, was sealed in silence. Next, to solidify his power and ensure loyalty, Franco Lao appointed 10 military commanders, 2 from each former independent state of the newly formed Confederation, and granted them sweeping powers. As a final gesture to cement their allegiance, he divided the confiscated assets of Warren Aris amongst these commanders. To further secure the loyalty of local governing elites, Lao established the House of Scions, an advisory council composed of influential regional figures. As a sign of gratitude to their newly ennobled positions, delegates unanimously elected Lao's wife, Caroline, as the first president of the council, symbolizing their loyalty to the new regime. "I am not as other men. I alone, because of my position, know what true government is. I persuaded that no one save me could govern the Capellan people at this time. Were I to die, it would be a great misfortune. Does that sound ridiculous? Remember, power is never ridiculous. I shall never permit anyone to insult me by treating me as if I were nothing but mere president. Now, with his power firmly consolidated and the new government established, Chancellor Franco Lau wasted no time moving towards the capital of Capella to prepare defense against the approaching Davion peacekeeping force. He immediately sent a communique to the Davion forces, informing them of his newly assumed title of Chancellor and proposing the initiation of negotiations to bring an end to ongoing conflict. This maneuver successfully delayed the Davion advance, giving Lau the crucial time needed to arrive in Capella ahead of the invading forces by a fortnight. Seizing this opportunity, Lau ordered all remaining army and naval forces to mobilize and regroup in systems within a single jump of Capella. When all is done, he took his party and left the system, mere moments when the Davions arrived. The Davions arrived to find Capella eerily deserted, its streets and buildings almost void of any human presence. A few pockets of local resistance emerged, but were swiftly neutralized by the peacekeeping force. The silence that hung over the city was unsettling, yet the Davions saw it as a victory. Their confidence grew, mistaking the quiet as a sign of Capellan surrender, rather than a prelude to something more ominous. The following day, the Capellan navy, consisting of ships from Sarna and St. Ives, along with armed merchant vessels from Lao, made their move. Jumping to the system, they caught the Davion ships in orbit completely off guard. What followed was a grueling 7-hour battle, ending in the total destruction of the Davion fleet. With the escape route severed, the Davion peacekeeping force found itself trapped on the surface of Capella, isolated and besieged. Seizing the moment, Franco Lau broadcasted a message, demanding the invaders surrender unconditionally. Despite the shock of the sudden Capellan naval assault, the Davion commander remained undeterred. His troops quickly entrenched themselves within the empty city, setting up robust anti-air defenses. Confident in his strategy, the commander believed that all he needed to do was wait for the Capellan forces to make their move, then shoot them out of the sky before they could land. With ample food, supplies, and ammunition to sustain his forces for an extended period, he felt secure. Additionally, a few remaining Davion ships had landed, offering a potential way to escape, and warned the Federated Sons when the situation would escalate into chaos. It was now a waiting game, and the commander was ready to hold his ground. But all that preparation was in vain. 2 minutes after the deadline for surrender, what the Davion forces had anticipated to be a Capellan invasion force instead turned into a nightmare. Hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles streaked across the sky, blotting out the sun. Moments later, lasers illuminated the atmosphere, ripping through the city, shattering buildings. Franco Lau hadn't come to liberate Capella. He had come to destroy it. He had ordered the city to be flattened, along with the destruction of 3 elite Davion regiments, the 3rd Aragon Lancers, Bindus Motorized Infantry, and the Illicent Commandos. 2,000 Capellan civilians were either being left behind or unable to evacuate, perished in the bombardment. To Lau, the loss of the civilians was a tragic and necessary sacrifice. He viewed it as retribution for the massacre at Lee 3 years prior. After the bombardment and his victory, Franco Lau relocated the capital of his newly formed Capellan Confederation to the planet Sion, as a somber tribute to the 2,000 civilians who perished in a brutal attack. A black border was added to the Capellan flag, symbolizing their sacrifice. It seemed like a good idea at the time. The Smiling Sons of the Tikhonov Union, a staunching patriotic veteran organization, had voted to end their support to Franco's new pan-Capellan movement, and as a symbol of their support, present the boss with a huge silver trophy cup at their next meeting on Chisholm. Everybody thought we could get some good mileage out of the whole thing. And somewhere along the line, someone got the bright idea that the boss should respond to this generous token of esteem by saying a few remarks in the native Chisolian dialect. The viewcasters would eat it up. But problem was, nobody realized at the time just how difficult Chisolian would be. It became quickly obvious that there was no way the boss would be able to make even a short speech in Chisolian.
given the little time we had to prepare him. Anyhow, we're committed. So, the short speech gets real short, then shortened some more. And finally, it's decided the boss will get up and just say, Jamil Aujurna. Thank you. It seemed too simple. Turned out it was. The night of the rally, there must have been 5 or 6,000 jammed into the hall. We were already behind schedule. No way to make up the time. The speaker goes on, and finally the opening remarks are over, done with. The boss gets his trophy. Hot, tired, exhausted from the speaker's eloquent ordeal, the boss, resplendent in his Capellan braid, metals blazing, steps up to the podium, lifts up the huge cup over his head, and smiling to the thousands present and the tens of thousands watching at home, yells out, Janela! Jor! For beer. The crowd was not impressed.
While the destruction of Capella Prime marked a significant escalation in the Davion invasion, a smaller but equally important conflict unfolded on the opposite side of the Capellan border. 1 year prior, sensing the end opportunity amid the Capellan Confederation's weakened military position due to its defense against the Davions, the Free Worlds League launched a quiet but calculated invasion on several border worlds. The League aimed to secure these territories as leverage for future negotiations, anticipating that they could be valuable bargaining chips once the Davion conflict came to an end. The planets of Zion, Berenson, Shiro, Andurian, and Assad were swiftly seized by the Merrick forces. However, despite the initial success, these worlds will remain fiercely contested for years to come, as the Capellans continued to fight for their recovery even as their war with the Davions raged on. Even though Franco Lau's position as Chancellor was supported by the heads of states and leaders from each independent planet within the Capellan region, resistance to his ascension still existed. Nobles and politicians, particularly those excluded from the decision-making process, were among the most vocal opponents. On Tikhonov, the old nobility, known as the Sheng, openly challenged the adoption of the Articles of Confederation, claiming that these would signal the end of their traditional privileges. Many nobles, in an effort to preserve their power, began raising private armies. Franco Lau, preoccupied with external threats, initially chose to turn a blind eye to the rebellious nobility. However, tensions escalated in February of 2368 when Baron Chigorin of New Hessen, the most vocal of Lau's opponents, seized a local munitions dump. He claimed to be securing it against an imminent Davion attack, but Lau saw through the ruse, recognizing it as an effort to undermine him and the Capellan forces. In response, Franco assigned General Anthony Lafarge, leading 3,000 non-Tikhonovan troops, to crush the rebellion. Although outnumbered by the Barons' 4,000 men, Lafarge was undeterred. He executed a bold strategy, surrounding the munitions dump and demanding an immediate surrender. When the Baron refused, Lafarge ordered his troops to set the savannah surrounding the dump ablaze. Realizing that staying would result in the destruction by fire and explosions, the Baron's force panicked, broke ranks, and attempted to flee. Most were either engulfed in the flames or shot down while retreating. Baron Chigorin himself perished in the blaze while trying to escape. Afterward, Lafarge's men successfully contained the fire, preventing damage to the munitions. The rebellion was squashed without a single Capellan casualty. This decisive event marked the beginning of the end of the resistance. The remaining nobles, shaken by the swift and brutal response, accepted Lau's authority, and by 3070, only 3 nobles continued to oppose his rule. The invasions continued until 2395, when the Capellans finally managed to halt the Merry incursions. With the death of Reynard Davion in 2371, the Federated Sons gradually ceased their invasion, although they would retain control of many former Capellan worlds. Franco Lau was, in every sense, a Lau. Like his forebears and successors, he had a variety of quirks and habits that many found difficult to tolerate or downright irritating. One of his most infamous passions was his love for music, particularly the bagpipes. Visitors to his household were often greeted by its screeching sound, while the house staff carried on their duties seemingly unfazed. Unbeknownst to the visitors, the staff had stuffed their ears of cotton to endure the relentless noise.
Despite this, it cannot be denied that Franco saved Capellan independence and autonomy. By the 1390s, the newly formed Capellan Confederation had become a fully functioning governing body. Soldiers from the various commonalities, once enemies, now fought together against foreign forces. The people were beginning to place their faith in this new hope. They believed that the Confederation was what was needed to finally bring peace and prosperity to the region and all Capellans. Content with this legacy, Franco Lau stepped down as Chancellor and retired with his wife to his homeworld of Lao. His younger brother Kurnath Lau succeeded him as Chancellor, continuing the Lao dynasty's leadership over the Confederation.